So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to Labor Market Information Manufacturing Launch and Learn. Just for information, this is an Interleap event. And in here, Toronto North Leap as well as Toronto East Leap, we work together to organize this event. My name is Sarwar Mustafa, and I'm based at Access Employment working with Toronto East Quadrant Leap. And my counterpart, Farheen Miraz, is in here, and she is from Toronto North Leap. Hi, Farheen.
Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all, and I'm really excited for this presentation. My name is Farheen, and I'm the Employment and Labor Market Coordinator at Toronto Northlip, as Sarwar mentioned, and really excited to see. This is the first event that I am being a part of as a co-host. So, yeah, Sarwar, take it away.
Okay, thank you. So this type of event we aim to organize quarterly, and this is as a result of this effort, this is the event we are now running. We'd like to know from you all what sector industry we should focus next time. So I'm also just reminding everyone at the end of the event, Farheen will share a link for an evaluation form. Please take 5 minutes to add your feedback so we can make sure that this event effectively aligns with your needs. I'm now going to read the land acknowledgement. So land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land we are meeting virtually on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty is signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Today, the meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community and on this territory. We invite you to reflect on land acknowledgements, what it means to you, and what we can collectively continuously do to build a safe and inclusive community. We have invited two presenters from FOCL, Mr. Basel and also Ms. Sabita Ramal. I'm just giving a little brief about Ms. Sabita and also Mr. Basel. Mr. Basel is an industrial policy researcher with a focus on supply chains, automotive vehicle and manufacturing technologies, and labor markets. He is currently the research director of FOCL Initiative. And Ms. Sabita Ramal, a PhD, she is the senior researcher and project manager with Prism Economics and Analysis, and she has a BSc in Social Science from the University of the West Indies and MA in Employment and Labor Studies from the International Institute of Social Studies. She has also a master in public policy and administration from Ryerson University and has completed PhD in education from York University. So this is about our two the presenters. So Mr. Basel will be focusing more on these specific insights of the job skills demand, the current and future trends, and Ms. Sabita will be giving the gender perspective in manufacturing, the current gender distribution, accessibility, challenges, strategies. I'm now handing over to Mr. Basel to start speaking about his insights about the manufacturing sector. Thank you. Welcome, Mr.
Perfect.
Basel.
Thank you, Sarwar. Thank you for the introduction. I want to start by thanking Farheen, Sarwar, and Serna for inviting us to present today to you about our work at FOCL. So we're very happy to present to this audience in particular because throughout our projects, in particular the FOCL project, we usually present to employers, we present to government, we present to industry associations, mostly involved in the manufacturing sector and in the automotive industry. And we're really happy to expand our outreach because a lot of the work that we do is applicable in many sectors and many industries. And it touches on a lot of the critical topics we're having a conversation about, especially immigration, and the labor market. So we think at Focal that a lot of sectors, industrial sectors, are currently going transformation, some kind of transformation, mainly because the government, and there is a lot of uh, uh, demand to move to a cleaner economy. So we see that in the auto sector with the shift to electrification. We see that in, let's say, the building in terms of shifting to cleaner energy building and to more efficient building and sustainable practices. We see that in oil and gas, phasing out oil and gas, and that has an influence or affects the demand side of the labor market. But there's also a big conversation, or more important conversations, going on the supply side of the labor market. And on that, there's the immigration conversation that's going on. There's the retirement of baby boomers, which is also influencing the supply of labor in different markets and different regions. And there's housing, and there are many other topics. So a lot of these topics, I think, are essential to discuss and important to discuss, and also from many aspects. So we think at Focal that good research is needed, and good research is needed to inform good policy. And with good policy, we have good labor market outcomes. So I'll give you an overview about what Focal is. I'll tell you more about the work that we've been doing over the past probably 18 months now. And by the way, we're close to wrapping up our second round of this project, and we're looking forward to do more work on this topic. And then I'll hand it to Sabita, who's joining me today, to tell you more about the interesting stuff about the diversity and immigration in the labor market in manufacturing, and then we'll wrap it up and open it for questions and discussion. So I'll share my screen.
Basil, I would just like to quickly interject, if you don't mind.
Okay.
You mentioned one of the key reasons or influence was retirement of baby boomers. If you can just quickly mention, how do you define baby boomers for those who might not have a full understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. So we call baby boomers as the category of workers who are retiring. All of them should be retired by 2030, and that's when they reach the age of 64, the age of retirement. So that influences. So this specifically, this category of population is the biggest category in the labor market, and that influences the supply in the labor, the supply of labor in the labor market, and that influences the recruitment gap. And I'll touch on that in a bit.
Thank you so much.
Okay. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So Focal is a partnership between three organizations. Back in 2019, we applied as three organizations, and I'll introduce the three organizations in a second. But as three organizations, we came together, CSTEC, APRC, and Prism Economics, and partnered on a project to get funding from ESTC. Specifically, back in 2019, it was the Sectoral Initiatives Program, to do labor market research and to inform the automotive sector of the different challenges and the technological advancement in the automotive labor market. And back then, we received funding to do research and labor market analysis for 3 years. More recently, in November 2022, we received another round of funding under the Sectoral Workforce Solutions Programs, SWSP, to continue the work that we are doing. We started back in November, and end of this month, March 31st, we're wrapping our second round of this project. So CSTEC is an organization based in Toronto, which is the Canadian Skills Training and Employment Coalition, which was involved in a lot of the labor adjustment practices and the NAFTA negotiations back in the 1980s, 1990s. The Automotive Policy Research Center is actually started back in 2011 as part of McMaster University and became a nonprofit organization back in 2019. And Prism Economics, which is a consulting firm based in Toronto, and Prism does a lot of works with a lot of clients that are interested in knowing more about the labor market, and does economic analysis as well. So Focal started back in 2019, and we're still continuing the work. And more recently, we've been focusing on the shift or the transition to EV electric vehicles in Canada's automotive manufacturing sector. We think that this topic is critical. This topic influences the labor market, and it has different implications on different aspects of industries and sectors. So an overview of what Focal does. So we have mainly three streams of activity in our project. We do hiring and training. So we offer wage subsidies, which are mostly funded or given to us by the government. So we offer wage subsidies and training subsidies to train job seekers, current employees on different practices or skills needs that are needed with the transition to electric vehicles. Another main segment of our project is research, which we'll present to you most of our research work in today's session. So in research, we try to do economic and labor market analysis. So we work usually with a labor market model or with an economic model to look at the different impacts in, let's say, the automotive labor market, or let's say the manufacturing labor market. And we do occupational supply and demand forecasts. So we'll look at the changes in supply and demand on a national, provincial, and regional basis. And we produce a lot of reports. So on our website, we have over 60 or 70 reports. And some of these reports, specifically under trend reports, you will find reports on diversity, you'll find reports on immigration, apprenticeship, technological change, and so on. And we do a lot of communication and engagement. So we have a network of over 1,000 employees or employers, sorry, in the auto sector, which we directly work with in terms of hiring and training, in terms of sharing with them our research. And a lot of them reach out to us for some guidance and advice on labor-related issues. So as I said, we're wrapping up the project end of this month, and all of our reports are available on our website, futureautolaborforce.ca. So in terms of the hiring and training, we have worked with over 1,400 participants throughout this project on hiring and training. So we have over 1,100 workers trained, and around 400 people placed in jobs. Around 1/3 of our participants are members of equity-deserving groups, including women, racialized people, and newcomers. And initially we had some challenges with working with youth, because mainly because they have some negative views of working in manufacturing. But we had good success working with participants from this specific demographic. And we worked with many organizations, mostly SMEs. SMEs have more challenges in training and hiring, mostly because they don't have the resources to, they don't have the human resources to hire and train their workers. And we have worked overall with over 130 organizations in the sector and in many other industries. So an overview of the industries that we are active within, mostly in the auto sector, but we do a lot of work in manufacturing, primary metal, rubber product manufacturing, plastics, food manufacturing. So a lot of activity in different industries and sectors. And we're expanding our network. We're targeting different industries and sectors for hiring, training, and research. So I'll move to the transition to EV production, which is, I think for this project, it was one of the main outcomes of our research work. And I'll tell you more about the work that we did in this on this specific topic, and then I'll turn to Subito. So back in November 2022, when we were awarded this project, we thought that looking at the transition to EV production is key in for the future of the auto manufacturing sector and its labor force, mainly because we think that the transition to vehicle electrification will influence the labor market of automotive production. So for this reason, we built an economic and the labor market model to measure these implications. So our model works for the period of 2025 till 2040. It forecasts the changes in different occupations and in different industries, and the impacts in different occupations and in different industries. So, and we tried to extend our analysis to include the whole automotive supply chain. So that includes vehicle assembly, vehicle parts manufacturing, and going back to battery pack manufacturing, vehicle assembly, cell and module manufacturing, material processing, which includes cathode, anode, and precursor cathode manufacturing, as well as material filtering, and all the way back to mining. And this was critical for the auto industry because the bigger you define the industry, the better for the industry. It's actually better for the industry as they go and lobby the government for more subsidies and more money. Through this analysis, we tried to estimate and we tried to inform the industry of the direct, indirect, and induced economic and labor market implications. So we tried to inform the sector of any potential job losses, job gains. So if you look, for example, at the engine manufacturing industry, as we transition towards electric vehicles, well, the demand for internal combustion engines will decline, and that influences or that affects a certain segment in the automotive market. So the analysis was mainly to highlight where are the risks of this transition, where are the opportunities in this transition, and how does the labor market of the automotive manufacturing sector look in an electrified vehicle manufacturing industry in Canada. So 3 stages of our model, and mostly I'll get to the part where I tell you more about the occupational forecasts and how we measure the recruitment gap. Now, in our modeling work, we tried to cover different scenarios that may be the outcome of this transition in Canada. And as I said, we tried to cover a period from 2025 till 2040. The different outcomes. So one outcome we thought of as a shift towards manufacturing battery electric vehicles and increasing our North American market share in production across Canada in terms of vehicle production. So by 2040, we're manufacturing mostly battery electric vehicles, and we increase our North American market share, or we increase our vehicle production volumes from around 1.2 or 1.3 million vehicles to up to 1.7 million vehicles. In the second scenario, that's where we looked at the risks of this transition. So for example, you have consumer preferences, you have range anxiety, not enough infrastructure in terms of charging infrastructure was implemented or invested in within these years, so that hinders, for example, the volumes of electric vehicles that are purchased and the volumes that are produced. So in this second scenario, we tried to cover a scenario where we manufacture a mix of vehicles. So for example, we included in the scenario battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and internal combustion engine vehicles. In the third scenario, we combined the assumptions in scenarios 1 and 2. So we have a full shift to battery electric vehicle production in Canada, but we have a stable North American market share, or in other words, we produce around 1.3 million vehicles by 2040. So we also made assumptions on the battery side. So we took into account all the assumptions or all the announcements that were made since 2020 on the battery manufacturing side. And we tried to cover the different outcomes of, or the different possibilities of the Canadian battery manufacturing supply chain. So in scenario 1, we assumed that that we have 4 battery plants announced in Canada, or we have 4 battery plants become operational in Canada by 2040. They operate at 75% capacity, and they produce 100% for satisfying the demand in the domestic Canadian market for battery production. In scenario 2, that's where you have more risk. So 3 battery plants operating at 30%, and 10% of, let's say, the mining industry, the material processing industry, cathode and anode manufacturing are satisfying the domestic demand for battery manufacturing. So the rest is satisfied through imports of materials. The third scenario is again kind of in the middle between scenarios 1 and 2. So 4 battery plants operating at 75% capacity, but we're not very successful in bringing up the capacity in mining, material processing, and filtering, and cathode and anode manufacturing. So we try to cover all the possible outcomes, and based on our analysis, based on our model, and taking all of these results and running the numbers through another economic model, which measures the direct, indirect, and induced implications of this transition on Canada's economy, we found that in scenario 1, if we transition to battery electric vehicle production by 2040, we will have around $50 billion added to the economy and around 100,000 jobs created. In scenario 2, that's where we have less success in producing electric vehicles. We don't get investment in mining, material processing, and so on. So that's where we don't see a lot of change in the overall market or the overall economy. So that's where we have around $4 billion added to the economy and around 4,000 jobs created. Again, scenario 3 combines scenarios 1 and 2, and that's where we saw that if we actually transition to battery electric vehicles without increasing our North American market share, we have around $16 billion added to the economy and around 25,000 jobs added to the economy. Now, there are different market dynamics which influence the, let's say, the job creation in the market, including the prices of some materials and so on. So all of this was taken into account in our model. And actually, I think this slide, I included this slide just to demonstrate the level of detail we worked with. So we did the analysis and we obtained results for over 230 industries. So we measured the labor market implications for over 230 industries and the economic implications for over 230 industries. But the way we grouped them is our main focus was looking at the main automotive segments in automotive manufacturing. The other thing that I would like to highlight is the potential of this transition. So we're looking at if we're successful in transitioning to battery electric vehicle manufacturing, and if we're successful in bringing up the North American market capabilities, bringing up the Canadian capabilities in mining, material processing, and so on, there's a potential of creating 100,000 jobs. Now, this has its own challenges in terms of attracting more labor towards this market and attracting more workers towards the auto industry. But in some terms, there's a lot of, in other terms, there's a lot of opportunity in this industry. And if we can get people to, let's say, join the auto industry and work in the auto industry, well, that may be the focus for if we're successful in bringing up these capabilities. So we thought we'd also include our recruitment gap analysis for the greater Toronto and Hamilton area, mainly because, I mean, we actually do the analysis for 5 regions across North America. 5 regions across Ontario. But we included this specific region for this specific presentation because it covers Toronto and it covers different regions. Now we are able to do the analysis for Toronto specifically or different regions around Toronto, but this covers mostly the GTHA region. And the GTHA region is actually a big region for the auto industry. It employs around 65,000 people across 190 establishments. And the majority of the employment is within the core of the supply chain, or the core of this industry, which is assembly and parts manufacturing. So our analysis, or our analysis of the recruitment gap takes into account different factors which influence the labor market, the supply and demand within the labor market. So we look at expansion demand, which is driven by, let's say, startups, growth in EV assembly, battery production, and so on. But this expansion demand is also influenced by different factors, such as a reduction or elimination of certain businesses within the auto industry, economies of scale, and lower production of EV assembly. There's also the replacement demand, which is mostly driven by the aging population. And as I said, we have a big category of our or a big demography, which is retiring over the next few years, and that will influence the replacement demand. So mainly the aging population, retirements, and mortality are what influence the replacement demand. Now, new entrants are mostly driven by first-time entrants to the sector and immigration, and this is something to focus on, because if we have a good plan or a good analysis of the labor market, and if we know where the recruitment gaps are in the labor market, we can use good policy and good research to plan forward for the for immigration, and how we actually land immigrants in Canada, and how we actually provide them with good opportunities in employment, especially in the auto sector and the manufacturing sector. So higher recruitment gaps indicate tighter labor market and skill shortages. No recruitment gaps indicate more balanced markets. But as you'll see, we have a lot of pressure in the manufacturing sector and across different sectors, but specifically the automotive manufacturing industry. There are recruitment gaps, let's say, in motor vehicle assembly, in manufacturing managers, and material handlers, skilled trades, and other occupational categories. And it is going to influence the need for labor over the upcoming years, and it is going to influence how we actually handle our immigration policies over the upcoming years. In terms of recruitment gaps, as we're transitioning towards vehicle electrification in the auto sector, there's a big demand for electronic assemblers, tool and die makers, and other occupations. And these are actually big shares of what we have of employment as of 2022. So 73% of electronic assemblers are going to be retiring and needed over the upcoming years. And this is kind of, it demonstrates the different segments where the recruitment gap is. So for example, in management, engineering, technical, production, and skilled trades, those are the main categories we're looking at. And those have big recruitment gaps for the GTHA region, specifically around 55,000 workers over the upcoming years. We at Focal also developed something called skills transferability matrices, which are tools which we are using to look at the transferability of certain skills across different occupations. And we see applicability for this tool for immigration purposes. So if we can look at the transferability of different skills of immigrants and their compatibility with the requirements for certain occupations in Canada, that's one way to get better outcomes out of immigration research and immigration policy. Finally, for my slide on occupational profiles, we produced over 40 documents, which are more like marketing documents for us, which look at the different profiles of occupations across the manufacturing sector. And those can be used to attract youth and immigrants to work in the sector. So they outline the career progression, the opportunities, for, let's say, growth in the sector. If you start, let's say, as a machinist, you might end up to be a manufacturing manager. And we have all of these documents on our website. So now I'll turn it to Sabita to tell you more about the more interesting stuff. And then we'll wrap it up and we'll take questions and we'll discuss if you have any other topics to raise. Thank you. Sabita, to you.
Hello, everyone. Basil, you just want to turn the next slide. Okay, so I'm going to talk mainly about immigrant participation, but we will touch on women as well in the automotive sector. We'll talk about a little bit about supply chain employment and what we hear employers are saying, and then a little bit on where we think immigration policy should head. So this presentation is mostly focused on the first paper, which is still in editing stage, but we will post it on the Focal website. We also have the diversity and employment in Canada's manufacturing sector, automotive manufacturing sector paper posted. And the 3 papers below are some of the other papers that we did in the first round of the project. One that focuses specifically on women, one that looks specifically at immigrant labor, and the first one looked at women, youth, and Indigenous persons. So if you are interested, we have those resources on the website that you can look at. So when I say assembly and parts production, I'm focusing there on the core part of the automotive sector, right? So it's easier to get data on that aspect because the supply chain, there's aspects, percentages, shares that belong to automotive, but shares that also belong to other sectors. So here, when we say 20% in assembly, that's mainly the unionized, the GMs, the Fords, the big companies. And then 27% in parts, that's the smaller companies, SMEs. So women are underrepresented when we say that because we are 48% of the workforce, right? So if you're looking at representation, that's underrepresentation for women generally. If we look at the long-term trends from 2010 to 2022 in the labor force data, there has been some change. So if you compare overall manufacturing, there was a 4% increase, but in assembly, in parts production, there was a 20% and assembly 45.8%. So there is a little bit of movement, but as you can see, there is room to improve women's share in that sector. So this is our favorite story, the gender pay gap, which, you know, some people like to think doesn't exist, but I like to always have a table on it. This is at a high level. So one of the arguments against the gender pay gap is that all women occupy certain positions and men occupy higher paying positions. So that's one issue. But the other issue is if women and men are in the same positions, doing the same work, why is there a gap? So that's something that society and the sector still has to deal with. But if you look, there's a lot of work still to be done in the gender pay gap. So I looked at generally, there's a 13.3% gap in Canada, assembly 4%, and parts production 18%. That means men are getting 18% more, right? Generally. So the gap is lower in assembly. So that's where we want women to go, I think, right, Farheen? If the gap is low, we want women to go there. And actually, CSTEC and Focal has placed some newcomer women in assembly, so that's good. And I think GM announced that when they reopened the GM plant, they targeted 50% women to be hired into that position, into those new positions. So there is some awareness, being created around gender equity in employment and gender pay equity with the work we are doing. So I can't really see Basil, can you minimize the faces because it's blocking the charts and I can't really see it. Our faces, I think it's blocking.
I can't.
Farheen, can you do that?
Does it work now for you?
Um,
Maybe you could go to the view button and
okay, I've done it. Okay, so if you look at the table, the pay gap for average hourly wage, median hourly wage, average weekly, and median weekly is on the last column. So you can look at that and see that in all categories, there is a pay gap. So that is real. So we're comparing manufacturing with assembly and parts production. And the gap is biggest in parts production. And that's where more women are and where women are more in lower paying occupations. So that's the story there. Basil, next slide. We don't have a lot of time, so I'm trying to go quickly. So this slide actually looks at just women. So we have all industries, manufacturing, assembly. So when I say 3361 is assembly, 3363 is parts production. The blue shows you we are 48%, right, in the economy. But if you look at manufacturing, we are 39%. So that's pretty high. And if you look at assembly, that's the GMs and the Fords and what have you. It's 25% of, so it's actually women as a share of women employed. So when I say 25%, it's 25% of women who are immigrants, right? So I didn't separate out newcomers, it's just immigrants. In parts manufacturing, 27% of the employed are women, but 50% of that 27% are immigrants, right? So you see where the employment is in parts, which is the smaller companies and also not unionized. So in the manufacturing sector, of the 29% are women, and of that 29, 39% are immigrant women. Okay, Basil, can we go to the next slide? So here, this slide is about, again, from the labor force on immigrant trends. So as you can see, again, I'm talking about the core sector, which is 3361 and 3363, and comparing it with manufacturing. The sector is very reliant on immigrant labor. Again, higher representation in parts. This data is national, right? But if you net out the rest of Canada, most of it is in Ontario. So even though I presented it at the national level, it's really, we're basically talking about Ontario, where 24% in assembly and 47% in parts production are immigrants. Next slide, Basil. So I don't know if you can see this, but in terms of comparing immigrant employment share in automotive and the supply chain sector, which Basil showed you, the supply chain that goes straight back to mining. Assembly is ranked 20th. Parts production ranks 5th in the share in the sector, 44%. That's part production, 27%. 20th, and it's 27%. So it's 20th ranking, 27%. And then you can see immigrants are less represented in the supply chain, especially outside the GTA, where jobs are emerging. So there's no mining in Toronto, but jobs will be emerging in mining in Quebec and Ontario. So that is a longer story, longer term story that Ontario has to address. Here we're looking at, as Basil had mentioned, the recruitment gaps in these different groupings: professional, technical, managerial, skilled trades, production, and IT. So I included IT as a separate category in the phase 2 of the project because of mobility and the transition and the increase in sophistication of connected vehicles, and you know, that's why the sector now uses a lot of IT folks. So if you look at the individual occupations, there's things that's very obvious. Mechanical engineers, right? Because we get a lot of mechanical engineers immigrating to Canada. So they're well represented there. Manufacturing managers are not so much, but Basel's recruitment gap showed that there's a need for manufacturing managers, which I hadn't paid attention to before the Basel forecast. But now we see there is opportunity for manufacturing managers hiring because there's a recruitment gap, right? So if you look at trades, the skilled trades, that's a lower share. Machinists and machining and tooling, welders, industrial electricians. That's where the need is too. But when we look at the immigration data, we'll see what's happening with that. So the skilled trades is where the labor shortages are greatest. Can we go to the next slide? So this is data I put together from the immigrant. It's a custom request on StatScan. So it's a little tricky to understand. So the data is tax filers in 2020, right? So it's I tried to get later data, but I couldn't wait on StatScan anymore. So it's tax filers in 2020. Looking at people who came in from 2015 to 2019 by admission. So if you look at skilled worker and skilled trades, principal applicant, the increase was only 17%. Canadian experienced class principal applicant, 103%, huge discrepancy, right? That is students and temporary foreign workers apply. Now, this is all of Canada, all immigrants. This is not Ottawa or anything like that, because the data for that is not very good in the immigrant database. So this is everybody, looking at everybody. So what you have on this Canadian experience class is international students and temporary foreign workers using the various immigration streams to convert their status to permanent resident. And then you have a 60% increase in PNP, which allows each province to select have more flexibility around who they're bringing into the province based on labor market need. So the PNP is what gives the provinces flexibility, but the rest of the categories, the federal government is responsible for. And we have some municipal pilot projects that's also going on that allows other areas to recruit, which I discuss in the paper if you are interested in reading the paper when it's posted. And you have a 35% increase in refugees and declines in caregiver business program. So I make a comment in the paper around the caregiver decline, which is concerning because you have the aging population and you have women who want to work, and women are the principal caregivers in the household. So how is those things going to play out if caregiver intake is declining? Do we have a next slide, Basil? Okay, so this is just to qualify. This is not a scientific exercise. This is simply what our coordinators here. So I did a focus group with the coordinators from CSTEC who actually work in the field with placing people with employers. This is what they hear from employers, and this is based on what I heard from them when I interviewed them as well. So this is just a smattering of what we are hearing. So they're saying they are unfilled higher level positions, but people are not applying for them. And these people might be immigrants in their workforce, in their company. So this might be a good advice for job counselors and people who are advising. If they let human resources know that they have higher qualification, they could be moved into other positions. And that has happened but it's also happened where some people have refused to move into a higher position for some reason because they have some other goals they're studying, what have you. So they didn't want to move into a higher position based on their experience. We're running out of time. So we have the newcomers being overqualified. There's some language issues employers mention. So that is a screening thing. If people cannot communicate in English, then it's a safety issue in manufacturing. They have a conversation. So one company said they have a half-hour conversation with them. And if they cannot communicate, then they're screened out. So in terms of the refugee population, one size doesn't fit all. People are all different where they come from, and they have different ambitions and goals. So some people might stay in manufacturing, some people don't stay, depending on their qualifications, the country of origin, and what have you, and their own goals and ambitions. Transportation is a big issue for newcomers, especially with the cost of lack of proper public transit in Canada and the GTA, and cost of owning and having a car now. That's even more of an issue. So that has to be addressed in serving newcomer and immigrant populations. If we are placing somebody, we need to have them with some sort of transportation, talk to the employer about it, or what have you. Oh, I wasn't finished with that slide. Can we go back? Employers want help with their immigrant workers who want to transition their status. And foreign credentials, recognition of skilled trade credentials is an issue. Nobody is looking at that. Wes is looking at degree credentials. Nobody's looking at that one. And retention is an issue, but that's improving, we hear. Next slide. I think it's the last slide. So what I have over the years, looking at the data and in terms of my own experience since the 1990s, is that there continues to be a mismatch in labor supply and demand based on the immigration selection process. There is continuing unemployment of university-educated immigrants. In terms of manufacturing, the jobs will be more outside of Toronto, like Basil mentioned and showed you where the golden horseshoe is where the jobs will be. And one of the things I would like everybody to talk about when they're dealing with government and with other entities who can help is to look at this issue of whole of government policies to address housing and healthcare when we're talking about attracting more immigrants or retaining immigrants. And this is more of a general issue that we have to think about. And that's my story.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was so insightful, and we already have a lot of questions coming up. I'll move on to the first question. It's we have 10 minutes, so Ambreen Ahmed asks, I had a question related to training of workers. Being from adult upgrading sector, we have found the impact of low literacy skills on job retention or even being hired in the industry. Has the project had conversations with adult upgrading sector on how they can support job seekers or workers with low literacy skill? I'm just going to copy paste it in the chat just in case you want to look at it again.
So, Peter, you want to take that one? Or?
I'm trying to get the screen back, but I don't know how to get it back to see people. Okay, I'll just speak to a blank screen. Can we remove the sharing of the slides so I can see people?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. So when we say, is it basic literacy skills we are talking about, or English as a second
basic
language?
literacy skills.
Okay, so in dealing with our coordinators, we've heard of language skills. We haven't really heard of basic literacy skills. So the focal project provides training for the people they're recruiting. So let's say some of it is short-term training. So like, let's say forklift training or stuff like that. And sometimes they go into longer term college programs, depending on the program they access in. So it's not just focal, but they have other programs at CSTEC that they can support newcomers with. But the literacy part is something that the employer cannot deal with. That the supporting organizations, employment agencies are the one that has to provide that support in terms of language upgrading and the basic literacy skills.
Yeah. I just wanted to add that literacy is not language. It's reading and writing, but in a different context. So,
Right.
and we are the support organization, but in Toronto, we have 33 different service providers that run programs in college, school, and community agencies.
Mhm.
And we've conducted organization needs assessment. We have found employers do not recognize literacy skills, but that is a big issue in workers, not necessarily with language issues, but literacy skills. They don't know how to read a document or how to understand information. And this new skills for success is a perfect example of that framework. So and I would love to have conversations on it.
So are you saying that the employers are saying their workers don't have, or they're not
No,
hiring
so
people because they don't have it?
So all over Ontario, we are conducted ONAs, different support organizations are. And we have found that literacy skills is not, language skills is more identified because it's easier. But literacy skills are there and it is affecting workers. So it's just a matter of working with employers to make them realize what's lacking and how our free programs can help them. So it's not important that the employers can train them. It's our programs who could train them.
Okay, so I think what that is an information gap, because employers
Yeah.
do not know what is available. So,
Okay.
so what we need to think about is how do we get that information to employers? Because I was talking to one employer who was based in the GTA, and she actually sent workers for language training. Like they were investing money in providing language training. So, but I think they don't know what's available out there.
Okay, so I'll probably contact you and we can have a conversation about this because something free, our
Yes.
programs are free, right? So it would help this industry.
Yes, I think that's we have identified that there is a gap in information between what's available to help employers and to help them hire people and make their workforce better.
So, okay, will you be giving us your contact information so that I could contact you later on?
Farheen can
Sure,
provide it.
I can add
Okay.
it at the end.
Thank you.
Along with the
You
evaluation.
can
Thank you for
Google me
answering.
too. I'm
Thank you. That was
Googled.
a very important distinction, especially between literacy and language skills, because they're often equated. I'm going to move on to the next question. So Stephen Kamlasaran asks, are there any preventative measures when it comes to worker exploitation or strategies in mind to improve equal employment opportunity, especially for those who are newcomers?
So what do you mean by preventative measures?
Stephen, do you want to add on that?
Yeah, I guess like if there's anything that companies or the industry has in place to prevent workers from being overworked or underpaid, like are there strategies that for them to know their rights, I guess?
Well, the first thing is because of the labor shortages in the sector, they won't get anybody if they're ill-treating them. People is going to leave. So that's one of the things that's different in the current labor market, is that people don't have time to be abused. They're going to leave. They're going to go and do Uber. They're going to, they're going to do something else because there's other work out there. So manufacturers can no longer underpay or, if you choose to go and work under the table, that's your choice. But for a legit manufacturer, they have to pay above the minimum wage to even attract somebody, right? And to retain them. So there's that dynamic of they can't do that anymore. So there's that aspect where they have to pay above the minimum wage. And there's the other aspect if you're unionized. So in assembly and other sectors, you're heavily unionized. So that right away you're protected from that. But I would say those sorts of issues have kind of gone out the window because now labor has more power, right? But in terms of their rights, that is also something that I think generally, not just in manufacturing, the third sector can help people with and advise them of their rights, or in terms of, treatment in the workplace. But there's some good stories that we've been hearing actually that nobody writes about. I was planning to write about it, where the employer has actually changed and accommodated workers because of their cultural background. For instance, changing washrooms, because there's such a high percentage of workers from a certain population, giving people the option to work at Christmas because they don't celebrate Christmas and they get overtime or double time or whatever. And then they take their time off when they need to for their own holidays. So there's those sorts of cultural things that employees are doing on their own. They're not waiting on the Human Rights Commission and other people to tell them. They're doing these things organically because of who their workforce is and the changing face, literally, of their workforce.
Right, thank you for that. And I'm just going to the questions in the chat. Diana, you asked, does this take into account their education, internationally trained professionals? I'm not sure what the context is. Are you asking about something in the presentation?
Yeah, and when she was talking about the gap between men and women, and I just wondered whether, they take into fact that the, equal education as well, not just being in the same position.
Right. So, well, one of the reasons, if you look at high level, the high level data is kind of misleading because, well, it's not so much misleading because women in the parts sector tend to be in the lower paying positions. And somebody had asked about jobs for different types of workers. So for instance, let's say I come from a country and I've never worked. I've been a housewife my whole life, but now I need to work. We're in Canada. We need to income. There are certain jobs in manufacturing, they will just take you, right? So that's why you have such high level. There's reasons why there's such a high share of immigrant women in certain jobs, because they are coming with low language skills and not a lot of education. But all the manufacturer wants is somebody with 2 hands and 2 legs and 2 eyes, right? So
Yeah.
it depends where you are in your life, what education you have, because not everybody's coming with a master's and a PhD. There's some people who love the opportunity to go to a factory and work and have their own money and be independent, right? As women, we know that's still an issue for some of us. So just the immigrants is so misleading because there's such a diversity, to use a very overused word, a spectrum of who we are as immigrants when we say newcomers. So the sector, the manufacturing sector, and the core assembly and part production has such a wide spectrum. If you look at the occupations, it's such a wide spectrum of jobs. So depending who your client is, you will have to match them with based on their background. So if they have little education to no education, because here's a secret. When I looked at the Canadian-born data, by education levels, I was surprised at how many Canadian-born people have high school and under, right? But they're working. They're working in different sectors and including manufacturing. So because a lot of us have university education, we just assume everybody else has, but there's still a large share of both the immigrant and Canadian-born population that has high school and under.
Thank you so much. We are at time, so respecting everybody's time, but I also know that there are a couple of questions in the chat remaining. What I can do is I can send over the questions to Basil and Sabita and have their answers, and then whoever has joined and registered for the event, I could share it with them. Does that work for you, Basil and Sabita?
Absolutely. So yeah, please feel free to share our email addresses. At least on my end, you can always reach out to us, and we're happy to present to you about a more specific topic or answer any questions you may have. And thank you for attending today. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to mention that we will be posting the other paper, but if you're interested more on the diversity and women, that paper is already posted. And we'll be posting the other one in a couple of weeks where that has more information that might answer some of your questions.
Yeah, thank you for offering to do that. I can share that with the questions to everybody who registered. So that's a wrap on today's session. Thank you to our speakers at Focal, both Basil and Sabita, Sarwar, for kickstarting the conversation today, and Sarna Stambuk, you've been extremely helpful in organizing the event. And you've been integral in planning the processes. So, and to each of you for joining today's session, your insights, questions, and presence brought a lot, this event to life. I'm going to plug in the evaluation form now because we want to keep making our webinars better and more engaging. I know another evaluation form, but honestly, it will take 5 minutes and it really helps us to plan future session, and it also helps it allows you to be represented in our decision making in the future to make sure that our events match your needs. So think about what worked for you, what didn't, and what industry we should explore next. So you can find that in the chat. Sarna has reshared that. So thank you again for spending part of your day with us, your lunchtime with us. So it's the discussions like these that keep us moving forward. So stay safe. Let's keep the dialogue going and catch you in the next one.